Thank you very much for coming to our Atticmedia stand here. It may not be the right and best environment, but I will try and make this interactive. So if any of you want to interrupt me or ask questions or whatever, do feel free. These are our thoughts. They are there as much to provoke thinking as answers. So one of the things that we feel is of particular interest for learning in the future is how to deal with all these different screens, different screen sizes, different environments for screens. And so we put together some thoughts on what we're dealing with now and how we may need to change our approaches for learning in the future. So if we move on. So first of all, there's some known trends in technology and learning. So these are things that are already happening and we already know about them. So the first one, this is very simple. It's also quite, I think it's quite amazing when you think of when iPhones were just a glimmer in Steve Jobs' eyes, that now we're looking at a world where the PC market is declining. Collapsing, maybe a little exaggeration, but it is definitely going down. There was a 5% drop in notebook sales compared to a 64% increase for tablet sales. And 2014 is the first year when tablets will be outselling notebooks. And I was reading some other research which was showing that on average people who get tablets are spending 2 hours a week using them at home, so they are becoming a really entrenched part of our lives. And a large number of people are having 2 tablets. They are really moving there into the everyday space. Now, smartphones themselves, they are absolutely becoming ubiquitous. 250.2 million units in the third quarter of 2013. 70% of Generation Y have a smartphone, use it. Basically, we're getting to a point where we have got more mobile devices now than people. And there's a huge appetite to use mobile devices wherever, whenever. So whenever anybody can figure out how to use them, people are using them. Whether it's shopping, payments, entertainment, there seems to be no end in which these little devices are moving into our everyday life and changing the way in which we work. So the other element, this is less about technology, although it uses technology. It's more about things that we see in the learning world. So the really interesting thing here is the rise of MOOCs, massive open online courses. I don't know if any of you signed up or tried any of them. They are very interesting. You join another crowd of students and you share your learning. It is a guided thing, but there is a very large number of people and it's very open compared to our normal educational experience. And a look at the numbers, and these have really just risen in the last couple of years, and the scale that they're at now is really a shock when you think that 1.25 million students in edX, 4 million plus students using Coursera, 3/4 in Udacity, and over 1 billion downloads in iTunes U. So these are just examples, and there's a whole lot more going on out there where the ways in which people are digesting education, the way they are learning, is completely being rewritten in front of us. Now, there's also things like, this is just an example, the TinCan API. This is something which the old world of LMSs, they had your content in those learning management systems. They tracked what your students did. They tracked the assessments. They tracked the grades. TinCan API is an example of a new generation of approaches where what it's trying to do is track learning across all sorts of environments, across all sorts of places, and providing meaningful analysis of that work, which isn't just simply, here are grades. It's about, this is what somebody did, this is how they interacted with somebody else. It is making the online learning assessment much closer to the ways that you would want to be looking at learning within a work environment. It's kind of moving away from the simple, here are numbers, to one that here is context and here is an understanding of the learners. So if we move on. So basically what we are seeing is a kind of first wave of new screens. And this first wave is these smartphones and tablets. So we'll have a kind of glance at some of the things that means for us as learning designers and as learning providers. So moving. The very first step is the simple one of you've got content from the desktop, and you want to put that content on smartphones, on tablets. Now, it may seem easy. It's just a different screen size. You could just put it on there and you just expect people to use it. But the reality is that the way people use these devices is very different, and also the types of interaction that they make available to people is very different as well. So it's really not just simply a question of repurposing content. It is a matter of really taking content that you've got, extracting the bits that work, and also rebuilding elements and rethinking the way that learning will be delivered on these devices. An example is that, on the smartphones, on the tablets, your main way of inputting is tactile. Touch is a really, really important part of the experience. One finger with a thumb, two fingers, zooming in, zooming out. Those are things that are just not possible, obviously, in your desktop space, and they are things which change the dynamics in which people interact with the content. Other things, just audio. Generally, with a smartphone, with a tablet, audio becomes a little bit more problematic. You don't quite know where that is going to be used. The impact of these mobile devices is, as they are being used in more and more locations, then there are also some restrictions in the types of content because we know less about where they will be used. Another element to think about is the inputs. It's generally quite hard to input information into these devices. It's much easier to receive information. So if you've got learning content where you're asking for lots of inputs from the learners, then this is really one of those things that you really need to think about as to whether that will work. And another one that's very difficult is the duration. Sadly, one of the inevitable consequences of digital technology seems to be that concentration levels get smaller and smaller, and so the duration length for the kind of content that work on these devices also gets smaller and smaller. We found typically, up to 3 minutes is your maximum. After that, people are being distracted by other experiences, other content. So that was about taking content that you've already got, working on the smartphone. The other thing to think about is what I'm calling here kind of smartphone native. It's actually thinking about these as brand new devices, brand new experiences that need ways of working with that are completely different from anything else that we've got before. And an example why is that, we all know learning is fundamentally social. I think a lot of us find e-learning courses, although I spent my life designing and building e-learning courses, there is an element where they are quite dull. You sit there and a lot of them just become next, next, next. It's very difficult to get the same levels of engagement as you get when you are in a room together with other people. There is something really nice about learning together, and it's part of a human characteristic. We like learning from others. And the thing that really characterizes these mobile devices above all else is their social nature. They've driven the social media revolution. Facebook is now 50% plus on mobile. There are predicted to be in 2014 30 billion instant messages written on these devices. That translates to 18 trillion globally. And that just gives you an example of how constantly these things are being used to talk between people everywhere, any space. They are being used there for this social connection. So if we move on to... So in terms of what that means for learning, what that gives people is basically constant peer support. So even in meetings with these smartphones or tablets, people can be sitting there as if they're taking notes, but actually they're sending a request to colleagues to find out about something, or they're searching on Google, finding out information, etc. It is all becoming a part of the day-to-day work where they're tapping into their peer networks, they're tapping into that huge knowledge base, and they're finding out things on the fly from this. So instead of having to rely on those deep knowledge bases from having been trained in particular pieces of content, etc., they've got access to this device, which is actually allowing them to ask others and to tap into that peer network. And a good example is if you just go to YouTube and search on how to do anything, you will find that somebody has put together a video explaining how to do it. So the interesting thing is, no matter what we as learning providers like, the reality is it's happening. People are doing this. People are going off and finding out information. And one of the interesting things is that you can kind of see there's a kind of underlying paradigm shift here. There was a world that wasn't that far away, wasn't that long ago, where there was a scarcity of learning, where they relied on the formal training departments to deliver that learning, and they needed to book onto those courses and get the information that they needed. However, increasingly, there's an oversupply of learning. There is too much. They can access it whenever they want. And the problem becomes not the delivery of learning. The problem becomes whether our employees, our staff are actually able to distinguish quality and actually able to critique and actually see which of the sources that they're tapping into are actually appropriate to tap into. And that is a very, very different type of skill that people need, where we're moving from a space where you could guarantee that they had the information that you wanted them to have, you knew that the quality of that information, and you could be sure that they would be learning what you wanted them to learn. However, now we're looking at a world where they will constantly be tapping into other sources and receiving learning from that, and this becomes a matter of developing skills for them to be much more critical and much less accepting of that information, and to deal in an active way with this oversupply of learning. So, in terms of what that means for future learning development, and really this is thinking over the next few years, 4 or 5 years' time, we are moving from where learning is simply one of, here's a course, go off and study the course, to one where the learning is embedded in the tools that people are using. So the mobile apps, the tablet apps, the desktop apps, whatever, it doesn't really matter, all these different things. The learning itself we need to start thinking about the learning so that it is embedded within those tools itself. The work tools that people are using as part of their day-to-day work can also be those things that help people find out what they want, help them critique it, help them bookmark, help them build their networks, help them tap into that communal knowledge. And it is a shift from huge amounts of here is the knowledge that you need to know to here is the network of people that are able to help you at the moment that you need help. Now what we have here is just some example case studies of what Atticmedia has been doing. Initially on the kind of conversion, the development of course content onto tablets. I just pass to my colleague.
Hi everyone. So I'll take you through just 2 case studies, and then Mark's going to take you through a third. One of our clients, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, we've worked with them for 17 years. They keep coming back for some reason, so we might be doing something right. So this is an example of where we did something native. This was tablet native. Doesn't exist on desktops, just exists here on tablets. Genesis Park is PwC's leadership training program. It started off as being purely residential. They used to spend 2 weeks in New Zealand doing incredible leadership training. Because we're now in a world where people can do things remotely, 2 weeks away from a business, I think it was more than actually, is a lot. So slowly we've been working to reduce the amount of time it's face-to-face and building in technology, building in mobile technology. So we did a series of bite-sized, tablet-based resources for leaders to carry around on them, on their mobile phones, on their tablets. And they were very, very practical performance support guides and tools. These particular ones were around some themes, so sort of 5-minute experiences that you might look at just before you go into a meeting, for example. So if you are running a brainstorming and you're a leader and you're not necessarily that comfortable running brainstorms, it's a particular type of skill, not everybody's super comfortable with that. So it gives you a very, very quick sort of 5-minute learning bite on how to run effective brainstorms. Same thing for decision making. When you're going into a meeting where it's about decisions, what are the parameters of those decisions? How far are you going to allow the group to decide? Where are your boundaries? So getting people thinking about how to perform effectively as a leader in the moment, in the game. And mobile is brilliant for that. It's brilliant for carrying something around with you that you can refer to at the time, as opposed to going off away from your day-to-day workflow, doing some learning and then coming back. And other topics we looked at reframing. That screen there is about how you can put a positive slant on things in the workplace. Work is tough. If you're a great leader, you can reframe things for people. You can say to them, look, think about it another way. Think about it in a positive way. The way what we say and how we talk and how we communicate shapes the perspective of your team. We also created these slides here, so you can also relate the learning to somebody else straight away by turning turning the device round. We talk with slides. Slides are a good way to explain something. We gave them effectively a 5-minute slide deck. In fact, it was less than that, like a 1-minute slide deck. You turn around, you can actually explain to your team or your manager below you how to reframe, how to run brainstorms, and you've got something on you that you can aid you in communicating that learning. Another piece we did for PwC was around their brand behaviors. So PwC wanted to continue to have their consultants build relationships with their clients, be very relationship focused. We did a scenario which was primarily for mobile and for tablet, which was a video-based scenario. We dropped somebody into a situation where they play themselves. If you've ever seen Peep Show, the TV program Peep Show, the camera is you. Oh, that's how that show started off anyway. They then spoilt it by having different camera angles. But originally, the camera was you. So we did this first-person video drama. You never see yourself. It can be taken by a secretary. It can be taken by a director, a partner, anyone at any level. And the idea is that you're dropped into situations. In this lift activity, you get into a lift with a guy who you're led to believe is a maintenance man, and the lift breaks. If you're very task-focused, you think, my job is to get this lift working and get this maintenance guy to fix it. Actually, he's not a maintenance guy. He's a potential client. He's just dressed down because he runs a global social network. He's a potential client. If you engage with him, relate to him, turn the conversation over to him, he will tell you what he's after, and you can create a very good impression of PwC and win a new client. So it's a nice experience getting people to feel what the brand behaviors are. And it's all video-based. It's just the only interaction, the only input we talked about was pressing one of 3 options at certain points in the video. So that's great for mobile because mobile's bad when you've got huge amounts of text or when you've got complicated drag and drops or text entry. This was like point and click and a great short experience, worked really well on mobile.
Great. Thank you, Matt. This example we've included just to show that although we've named the talk about screens, that actually there is another element which is the audio element. This was a learning program. We were heavily involved in the initial setup, the design and the branding and the research, and it's English language learning by mobile phone. Now the way this worked was that it was designed for Bangladesh. It was designed for the BBC World Service Trust, and for this people simply dialed up on a number and then they used press this to hear this lesson, press that to hear that lesson. It remembered where people were and then it delivered the English language lesson. People were then sent text messages, summaries, and also given text message quizzes. And this is very interesting because it's about thinking about how you can use these devices in ways that really are unique to them. This was something that we were able, through running that approach, BBC World Service, were able to roll it out across the whole of Bangladesh, where we have had over 25 million users for, well, the aim was 25 million by 2017. There have already been that number of users across the whole service. And it's something where it delivers very, very simple interaction. It delivers types of content that work in the environment that it's designed for, little 3-minute lessons, and it's something which was highly accessible and designed just for the mobile platform. So the kind of key considerations from this is really about treating mobile as a learning experience in its own right. As the older feature phone world and the new smartphone world really think about what it can do that is special to itself. And also extensively test with your target audience. A huge part of the design of this was going out to users and actually seeing what would work. The initial assumptions were something that would be much higher tech and would be much more involved, but actually we found through that testing that that wasn't needed, and a very simple approach was the one that would work. So technology doesn't necessarily mean complexity. Often it means boiling down to a very, very simple requirement and figuring out what the gist of the service needs to be and removing all the excess elements that are no longer relevant. So then we have the next wave of new screens, and this is highly speculative. This is something we really don't know, but it's kind of fun looking at the things that are happening and contemplating whether or not we might have to be dealing with these in the years to come. So examples are Google Glasses. I don't know whether any of you have tried them out, but There's a kind of, you can just imagine with Google Glasses where you'd be able to have a world where people can just simply record lectures just through the glasses. They can then just play them back when they want. They just have webinars through the glasses as and when they want. Also on-fly translation, etc. It's a whole new type of interaction where the technology is becoming ever less visible. So when we look at these types of things, we're seeing the smartphone reduced. The desktop was a big piece of clunky equipment in the office. The smartphone is that little thing you hide in your pocket. These things start becoming part of everyday experience. Smartwatches, I really don't know exactly how they'll be used for learning, but the kind of just-in-time learning gives a new twist to that. But who knows? I'm sure there will be ways in which these little devices where something comes up on the watch that relates to where you are, what you are doing. And Oculus Rift, I don't know if you found this. It's a next generation of virtual reality headsets. It still looks a little bit too weird for me. I can't really imagine it as it is becoming a standard piece of technology, but it does point the way to where virtual reality, where people will really, truly find themselves immersed in an environment rather than simply looking at a separate screen, does become a possibility, and that opens up a whole wave of possibilities in terms of the times of learning environments that we generate for people. Then there's that whole big data, gathering that data from everywhere, anywhere. And it's kind of like, I think a general trend with all of this is that learning moves away from being a distinct item in its own right to being something that will be constantly present and also part of a whole load of other things. So it will be about a future where learning is more integrated into other parts of our organizations and their planning and what they are doing. And then if we move on, so I think there's a kind of a huge change in the nature of our workforces that this is going to produce as well. In the past, I mean, I can remember as a kid where it was all about what do you want to be when you grow up, as if you learned something, you went to university, you became something. Where now it's all about what do you want to do now, and it's the skill no longer is do you have that huge bank of knowledge. It's do you have the flexibility and the agility to find out what you need to find out tomorrow rather than relying on what you knew yesterday. And that is a completely different change in the types of people that we're looking for and the types of skills that people need to develop, and therefore the types of learning that we need to provide to help those people develop those skills. Now, we've been working on our own plans for the future. So our core project is Mojo Mobile. This basically takes the notion of Pinterest, where that quick, easy sharing of content, and mixes it into an environment that allows that sharing to be of use for learning, where teams in a workplace can easily gather all those day-to-day little bits that you know about, but then immediately forget about. You might write down somewhere, but you can't remember where you wrote it. You might email it somewhere, you can't remember where you filed it. This is about allowing teams to quickly and rapidly collect their knowledge seamlessly without thinking about it, just as a natural part of the day. And then from that, to build their own little learning snacks, which they can then share with their team and also share with future members of their teams and share with the rest of their organization as required. And the kind of behind that, we're developing Mojo Central, which is all about allowing us to understand what those teams are doing, what their needs are, and where there may be gaps in the learning, how they are developing, how they are able to be helping themselves. And it's about capturing natural and meaningful insight into your teams. So that's a very, very quick kind of race through a number of ideas, example case studies, and example things that we at Atticmedia are developing to address the changes that are happening now and will, I think without doubt, increasingly gather pace in the year and years to come. So I don't know if we have time for questions. We've got 5 minutes, so if anybody's got any questions or kind of don't feel shy. I know it's very noisy here, but...
Any questions?
Sorry, it was just a simple. Could you recap on what the TinCan API is? It just went.
I will see. It has to be a difficult question, doesn't it? So TinCan API. I can't give you all the technical details. Come and see us at our stand 22, and somebody more technical will help. But basically, it's the concept that you track not just your score in a very quantitative way. It's the idea that you give recognition to learning experiences. So it's more about collecting a portfolio of experiences and giving credit to those experiences and those interactions. So it's a much more expanded paradigm of tracking and giving recognition that isn't just about doing multiple choice assessments.
I think one of the important, if you remember the old term e-portfolio, I don't know if you came, e-portfolios had that aspiration that individuals would have a record of their learning that would last beyond just their current job. So TinCan API really takes that to the next level, where you have a learning record store that belongs to you personally, and you keep that no matter where you go, whatever you do. And the TinCan API is basically a standardization of information storage, but information that's more than just grades. It's about, I helped somebody in this community, I shared this to allow them to do things, and for that to go into that learning record store, and for other community interaction, if others, say, are rating what you are doing and saying that you really helped me, for that also to become part of that learning record store. So it's a mixture of branching out to more environments where you could be learning, and also giving somebody that personalized store that they can take with them as they progress from job to job and through their career. Anything else?
If you're saying the learning time is a maximum of 3 minutes, how does that tie in with normal presentation skills, decision-making skills, problem-solving skills training as we'd normally do it?
I think that there will always be space for where people just have to cut themselves off from the noise and the chaos of our modern digital, just in time, we want it yesterday type world. And there will be spaces where people just have to find the concentration. I think the 3 minutes is more about that understanding where these devices are used. So rather than trying to deliver a 1-hour course on a smartphone, is understanding that actually the smartphone for learning is being used on that kind of at the edge, on the moment. You know, you're going into you've got a meeting in 10 minutes time and you suddenly remembered you're not quite sure about something, and what you need is that very quick little bite of learning to pick up your skills. So I don't think, I absolutely in no way, and it would horrify me, the idea that we would all lose our ability to concentrate beyond 3 minutes. It's just understanding what these devices do, and not trying to shoehorn into them approaches that work better elsewhere. Because I think also one of the other interesting things that digital generally does is that it also gives more value to the real world. So 2008, I think it was the time when live events in the music industry outsold recorded performances. And what's happening in the music world is that digital, because it's making everything instant copyable, is actually increasing the value of the space, the real world space, where you get a unique experience. So I think the flip side to all this digital, just in time, we need it now, is that actually the real world learning and training will become more valuable, because that will become more exceptional, will become something that is more unique, and people will want as something that breaks and allows them to escape the kind of constant demand of the digital space.
Are there any more questions, or I think we're just about out of time? So I'll just say that so Mojo Mobile, the product that Mark was talking about, is going to be launching live to users hopefully in the summer. We are looking for people who are interested in being beta partners. It'll be a free experience, a free app. So if you want to come and sign up with my colleague Philip, we'll zap you and you can be a free beta participant in Mojo Mobile. Or we're on stand 22 and we'll tell you more about it. So thank you very much indeed for coming, and come and sign up for free Mojo Mobile.